Meow! Huples cat. The news broke yesterday that AstraZeneca, a pharmaceutical company working on the Oxford vaccine for COVID-19 disease, has halted their trials for the second time. They're accelerating. Everybody doing these trials is accelerating, trying to do it as fast as possible. And this is the second time, we believe, that they've had a case of transverse myelitis. Now, it's not confirmed. The first case was transverse myelitis, and I'll get into that a little bit. But in this case, the second halt has been fingered as transverse myelitis. This means out of the cases that they have been studying, out of the number of people they have been studying, there is a potential that 2 people so far have developed transverse myelitis. Well, I'm going to go into what it is, what it means, and the actual statistical numbers behind the number of people in the trial compared to the number of people that normally get transverse myelitis, and what this could possibly mean for the Oxford vaccine. What it could mean for the Oxford vaccine that is it is unsafe for human beings. Even if the incidence is 1 in 5,000, which it might be in this case, it is too high. It's a devastating thing to get, and this could mean that this vaccine, the Oxford vaccine, having been pre-ordered to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars all across the planet by lots and lots of governments, may be actually useless for human use. Now, the good news is that it's in the early days. They're going to try and see what they can do. The bad news is that these vaccines are being rushed faster than safety. We all know this, but the cost of the shutdowns and the political pressure to have a functional vaccine means that they're going to do them as fast as they can. For that reason and that reason alone, I'm going to try to avoid taking the vaccine for as long as possible and wait to see what's happening to people that take it early on. Unfortunately, I work in healthcare, and unfortunately my partner works in ICU. The pressure on us to first test people after the trial is going to be quite huge to actually take the vaccine. So the first person that caused a halt in the Oxford vaccine trial did develop transverse myelitis. They looked at it carefully and decided that it was a normally occurring bout of transverse myelitis. Now, when you have, in this case, 10,000 people on a trial taking a vaccine, the odds are that they will develop things like strokes, even heart attacks, and you'll pause the study, look at the data, make sure for 2 or 3 days before you enroll more people into it to make sure it's not the vaccine causing that. Now, it's not an exact science, but numbers are. What is the actual incidence of transverse myelitis in the population, and how many cases would you expect to see in 5,000 healthy adults who've signed up to be in a clinical trial? The closest analogue for most people out there watching this in terms of thinking about transverse myelitis is multiple sclerosis. It is a little different from multiple sclerosis. It is not multiple sclerosis, but it does in fact work quite similar. It does remove and attack the myelin sheath around the nerves coming off the spinal cord, which causes paralysis, and in the case of transverse myelitis is very well known for causing excruciating pain. Usually the causes are known, but it's related to a whole bunch of things. It is well known to be related to vaccination. Very, very rare, but it is one of the things that you can develop when you have been vaccinated, because it's a side effect that most people will never get, but some people do. So like all vaccinations, all medications, all operations in a hospital, a few will die or suffer terribly by the intervention, but if the vast majority do great and do a lot better because of the intervention will continue to be done. So similar to multiple sclerosis, the white fatty stuff that insulates the nerves, the spinal cord nerves that come off the spine, is actually damaged or removed in areas, and it is a terrible thing to get. The main characteristic difference with this is that it can be a precursor to actual multiple sclerosis. So with a large study, you'd expect to see some TM. So there is no cure for it. They try and suppress the effect by using steroids. We always use steroids for everything. I think 100 years from now, people can look back on 2020 medicine and say, they use steroids. It's like bloodletting. But at the moment, that's what we have. That's what we use. Plasmapheresis is also used to try and actually pull out whatever's causing it from the blood system, and then put the blood back in without them in the plasma. The other thing they do is they try and actually suppress the immune system, because it's thought to be an autoimmune response, and they can also give antiviral medications. Frankly, if we have a high incidence of TM being caused by a virus for COVID-19 disease, none of those options are particularly attractive, and it would actually mean that the vaccine could not be used in humans. Typically one episode lasts about a week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks. There's usually a temperature rise, and the progression of the disease can actually go up for 2 years. It can actually cause actual paralysis, either quadriplegia or paraplegia depending on where it's mostly affected, and it can actually cause a whole bunch of other issues. One of the main things, it will put people in hospital for an awful long time, but it will cause them severe pain. TM is characterized by severe pain. Now I know right now everybody out there is going, oh my gosh, I've got TM, right? One of the things that happens when we have heightened emotions and heightened focus, like when nursing or medical students or physio students go into hospitals, you see all those symptoms that you're nursing or looking after in you. It's a common thing. So if you're watching this, don't self-diagnose. Go to a doctor if you have concerns, probably virtually, and have it checked out. Because a whole bunch of things can mimic sudden stabbing, burning pains, right? Including nerve entrapment, which is way more common than TM. So it's mostly categorized by being rapid and not really having a specific cause, though vaccination is known to cause this. So vaccinations can cause this, but so can viral infections, and I would remind you that SARS-CoV-2 is a virus, and COVID-19 disease from that is a viral infection. So it wouldn't be unusual, though they've been very well screening people, a lot of the trial people are in Brazil, it wouldn't be that surprising if some of those people have COVID-19 disease and are developing TM from COVID-19 disease. What would be really shocking is that nobody in 28 million known cases has noticed TM occurring in COVID-19. Maybe we didn't notice, but it probably is more likely that the vaccine is causing it. Now, I know a lot of people are anti-vaxxers, and there's some reasons for not taking some vaccines, but really and truthfully, you're much better off mostly taking most vaccines in terms of your personal health outcome. The actual instance of TM that was studied, and I put up the slide from it and it'll be referenced, actually was 37 people in the entire world. So they specifically looked for people around the world and case reports of people who'd had vaccination and then developed TM, and they found 37. Right there, that should tell you, if they had one case already in the Oxford trial and they said no, it was just one of those things, they could have developed it anyway, we don't think it was the vaccine. Remember the vast quantities of profit related to having a vaccine that they can use. Now we have a second one, potentially. The reports out of the States from one person involved in this says it is TMM, a second case. Remains to be seen. If it isn't TM, this video is still a good video because it teaches you about vaccine and some complications from them in a relatively sane way. But if it is TM, second case, we have approximately 17,000 people out of 20,000 have been enrolled. That's about 8,500 of them have had the active vaccine and 8,500 have had saline. 2 out of 7,500 is significant. That's almost 1 in 3,000 in 4,000. Compared to a big multiple study that tried to find TM post-vaccination, and they found 37 in the world, looking way back in time, looking at a lot of publications. Now, June was TM Awareness Month, but I think quite honestly September is probably going to be a better month for it because this disease is really going to get noted and people are going to talk about it. And if you can and you feel able to, feel free to donate to the TM people. It's a terrible disease. As they point out, this is a very rare neurological disorder and 2 to 5 people per million develop it. So if the second case is TM, the odds are 2 to 5 in every million that you might have it. But if you take that particular Oxford vaccine, it looks like the odds are 1 in 4,000. That's why if it is TM, it's going to cause a lot of problems. It was also reported heavily, and they actually looked to the usual experts to make some sound bites on it. I'm just going to quickly roll these through. So when they say suspected severe reaction, when they're actually doing this, they do spinal testing and CTs and MRIs and the rest of it. They know if it's TM or not. Now it is true that the systems seem to be working, that they have put a halt to further enrollment in this test, this study. But the point is, it is late third stage trials, but the trials have been really compressed. Much faster than a lot of people have been saying who are experts in this. It's safe. So there's a lot of vaccines, over 70 out there being developed. How many of them are going to be rushed, given to people and cause really serious damage? Obviously the goal is to have us free from COVID-19 disease and wandering around and shopping. But we still owe ourselves the ability not to get seriously ill from trying to treat this. oftentimes the cure could be worse than the disease. So everybody's urging caution, and they're all saying, you know, we need more information, this is one of those things are working great. When you dig into it, there's a little bit more note of caution going on than that. Large enrollment, multiple people, take your time, take 3 to 9 months, take proper time to allow any adverse reactions to be noted. This isn't something you can just do, say it works in hamsters, and start shoving it into people. So as you say, there's only 9 actually in third stage trials right now. Whether the Russian one is a third stage trial or not, or the Chinese ones, because they're actually just giving it to people, it's kind of a third stage trial. They're going to see what happens to them. But it's interesting that they use a little bit of political dig at the US president, who's pushing as hard as he can to get a vaccine. The truth is, all of the people in charge of all of the countries, unless they're in denial about COVID-19, are pushing as hard as they possibly can to get a vaccine. And it's also the companies themselves are pushing really hard. First one to have a clinically proven safe vaccine is going to make billions upon billions of dollars. So it's a randomized controlled trial. So basically the people giving them it and the people studying them and the patients who are getting the injections, none of them are supposed to know if they're getting saline or the vaccine. It's a really good way of testing. And when you can look at the normal group that had nothing, and you can see what happens to them, you can also see what happens to other people. There is a placebo effect. How effective that would be with a vaccine is anybody's guess. They are of course committed to the safety of the participants, and they've designed this to rush this through with that in mind. But I am concerned that private companies largely are doing this, because overall private companies are going to do it faster, maybe not as well as government controlled. Government control's got more ethics behind it because of the university involvement, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why funding should have gone into the public sector, and it should have been international rather than just international corporations doing it. It would be a definitive blow. If this is a second case of TM, they have to halt giving this to human beings. If they try to keep giving it to human beings and they get further cases, that would be appalling. It's basically going to have to go back to the drawing board and start the whole process again. And of course, we need to know what actually happened. We can't just guess. I'm not guessing. There was a report out of one of the company people from New York who actually said it was TM, a second case. That's what I'm going by. I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention, because much like the numbers that mean nothing in terms of what you're doing to protect yourself from COVID-19 in your local area, what is really important is it's here and it can infect you and it can kill you and hurt you. So even if there's very low levels, you don't want to get it. If there's very high levels, you don't want to get it. But either or, distance, mask, hand wash, and general health. All of those things remain important until we have an effective vaccine, or like SARS, it disappears because it's been contained and died out and had no further transmission. We are a long, long, long way from that. So yeah, that person who had it may have had MS, and this may have been he felt or she felt fine, and then they had when enrolled in the study and they developed the signs of TM, they studied it and they did it. Bearing in mind the incidence of TM is 2 to 5 people in every million per year. 2 to 5 in 1 million every year. I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of faith in the FDA. I really don't. I don't have a lot of faith in the private companies. I don't believe they're going to try and harm people, but I do believe they often will willfully, unconsciously ignore results that are actually going to cause them a profit loss. The loss of being able to use this particular medication, the Oxford vaccine, is in the billions. So the Oxford vaccine is actually a viral vector vaccine, and that's kind of a fascinating thing, and I'll put some slides up for that so you can have a little tiny look at that. But I just want to point out something to all you anti-vaxxers out there. So what they did was they found a chimpanzee adenovirus and they've altered it to block the receptors of SARS-CoV-2. In theory, this modified chimpanzee adenovirus will not react and will not be able to replicate itself. One of the reasons they do these studies is to make sure that the virus they're giving to block, it's like you piggyback the blocker on top of an existing virus and put it in. And what it literally does is it has the same spikes that SARS-CoV-2 does, so you flood the person with it. The spikes connect, but nothing happens because it's a modified virus, it's a chimpanzee adenovirus, and it allows people to have a resistance to actual SARS-CoV-2, hopefully over a prolonged period of time. What I can tell you is that to try and get a vaccine for a coronavirus, and SARS-CoV-2 is a coronavirus, is going to be incredibly difficult. If we do this, it's equivalent of going to the moon in 1967. So if it does fail, it doesn't really matter too much. There's others in progress, hopefully they will work. But the Oxford vaccine was seen widely by a lot of people in virology as being the most likely candidate to succeed. The loss of the most likely candidate to succeed is a bitter blow. Everybody is fed up of lockdown and the economic disaster that's breaking out. People can't cope with wearing masks anymore because whatever. A lot of those are preppers and they're supposed to be prepping for nuclear war. I don't know if you can't wear a mask for 6 months, but you can survive a nuclear war. I'm not sure how that works. But we have to keep doing this. We have to socially distance, we have to wash our hands, we have to wear masks in public. We have to. We have to use all of our methodology to stop the virus going from here to somebody else until a vaccine can do it for us inside our bodies and we don't have to think about it. So at least 6 groups are already shoving vaccine into human volunteers, or in the Chinese and Russian cases just into everybody. And that's a really interesting thing. It's going to be fascinating to see. There's multiple types of vaccine. I'm not going to get into it too much. I said I wasn't going to do this type of a video in the last one, but I felt I should bring this to everybody's attention. So I'm not going to say I'm not going to go through what the vaccine types could be, but I will urge people. This doesn't mean that all COVID-19 disease vaccines are going to be dangerous. It doesn't mean that any vaccine is going to harm you. It means all vaccines, all medications, all operations have a fairly small chance of harming you. You wouldn't stop your child having his or her appendix out because some of those people die. What about giving birth? Did you know how many women die in Canada a year from giving birth? Do you know how many babies die after birth? It's quite staggering. It's a lot higher than a lot of people think. We have to take the risk on board of the vaccine. We have to get a vaccine that works, or we're going to have to sit around in our homes wearing face masks for an awfully long time. People are already saying that Christmas 2020 is probably toast. Yeah, it's toast, even with a vaccine. They won't be able to get enough syringes, they won't be able to get enough needles, they won't be able to get enough people to give it, they won't be able to transport it properly. There's going to be a whole bunch of problems vaccinating the 70% of the population, and preferably 80 to 85, that we need to do with a vaccine that works with minimal side effects to stop COVID-19 disease. Well, that's all from me. If you've got any questions, ask them below. I'll do my best to answer them. Have a great day and toodles. This was a Cat in a Box production, 2020.